and welcome everyone. Nice to see you all, and thanks for joining me today on another Ginette Biro Podcast. So you have to bear with me a little bit. I did have surgery on Thursday, so I am feeling still a little on the mend, although I like to think I'm like Wonder Woman and can just jump right up and do stuff. I run out of energy really quick. Now, that being said, I really wanted to post a bunch of the stuff that came through and has been coming through, and so I'm just here sharing it with you guys, and we will just roll through it anyways. So yeah, I think we'll just jump in and start. Oops. Here we go. And welcome everyone to the Ginette Biro Podcast. I'm Ginette Biro, and today I have some cool things to share, some messages from Spirit, because we are in such amazing transitional times. And I know in many ways I've kind of been saying that, but this is, like I said before, this is kind of part 2 of what I shared with you guys last week in part 1. So part 2 is to further discuss the concept of perception, okay? Because you got to follow me here with how they presented it. Now, what I could do technically is I could open up what we call the woo-woo box, which is this box into the rabbit's hole of all things beyond our 5 senses, right? And for some of you, you're like, yeah, dump it out. Let's get in there. And for others, you're like, let's just peek and see what's inside. And now there's even some of you that might say, yeah, dump it out. Let's just see what it is. I'm ready. I want to hear it all. And I have been there too, in that seat specifically many times, where I'm like, lay it all out for me. I'm ready. Give it to me. And what I recognized is when too much information is given at one time and we don't have enough time to kind of digest it, it can really rattle the consciousness of our human brain. So although we are multifaceted beings having this earthly experience, this human experience, we are experiencing that through a human brain. We have to remember that. So there is so much value in the ebb and flow of information that we get. And so although sometimes as humans we have this impatience to like, hey, let me tell me more, give me more, there is a reason why we're given information and then given time to process it. Because truly, whatever consciousness we are accessing, we then have to come back and live through it in a human way. So perception is key. And so I've got a whole ton of notes here. So basically they're saying perception is based in consciousness. Now, many times before I've mentioned that perception, you can either view something through fear or you can view something through love, right? And for some people that makes sense, and other people can't quite grasp the concept of viewing things through love because they can only really wrap their mind around love being something of an eros type love, like a romantic type love or a familial type love, whereas love is just the opposite of fear. So Spirit said, instead of presenting it as love, present it as consciousness. You can either view the world and view what's happening through a lens of fear, being afraid of everything, or you can view it through a lens of conscious awareness, of basically being aware that you are receiving information, then you move through that information, and then you consciously choose what you want to do with that information, right? That is a non-fear-based approach to it. So we can talk about consciousness that way. So it's not about looking at the world through rose-colored glasses, but it's about choosing how you wish to act. And that's something Spirit has said over and over and over. So they said that with everything that is coming through or to come through this fall, the key to maneuver it is based on your perceptions. That's what will separate the levels of consciousness. So in addition to that is not only, moving through your own sense of self and your own sense of awareness and what your truths are, and I'll get to that more in a minute, but recognizing which conversations you can have with which people regarding which topics. Now, what I'm getting at is if you are coming at something from a fifth dimensional consciousness and you're trying to explain that to somebody that is coming at it from a third dimensional consciousness, if this third dimensional consciousness is coming to the table of this conversation to prove their point, they don't have an open door for the concepts of fifth dimensional consciousness. Does that make sense? If they're coming to the table with a desire to prove their point based in an ego-based reality, whether that be fear, whatever it is, they do not have an open door to receive the understandings from a fifth D dimension of consciousness. Therefore, what you get is you get two different levels of communicating which are not hitting on the same plane. So that means you're going to be having conversations from different perspectives which aren't going to land, which will then cause you frustration, which will then come into personal triggers, whether you're in the three-dimensional frame of mind or the fifth-dimensional frame of mind. And it's important to recognize that because with some people, you will match consciousness in your communications, and with others you won't. It doesn't mean it's just A or B, there's also C. Now, whether you're in the position of third dimension or fifth dimensional consciousness, if the third dimensional consciousness participant comes to the table with questions, then those questions mean there is an open door for conversations which can cause the third dimensional consciousness to rise. This is where the benefit is. So meaning if someone approaches you to have a communication, or you approach someone of a higher communication and you're coming with questions, means you're open to. If you're coming with desiring to prove a point, then it means you're closed off to the reality that you're in. Now, this seems like I'm giving third dimensional consciousness a hard time, and I'm not. Because even from a fifth dimensional consciousness, if we're coming at a conversation from a fifth dimensional consciousness with a desire to prove fifth dimensional consciousness, we don't have an open door to understand the perspective of the third dimensional consciousness person. Whereas if we come with questions and a desire to understand through compassion, we can understand where they are at. Just as someone in a third dimensional consciousness could understand where someone from a fifth dimensional consciousness is at without having to understand the same plane of existence. So Spirit explained this to me, which I thought was really cool, because we have such a polarity still happening between the two levels of consciousness that we are going to be maneuvering these levels, especially as we move through the fall and we are kind of thrust into a lot of hyperactivity of events. Kids going back to school is a great example of this. There's also elections. There's also activities and a return to greater groupings of people, which causes a whole bunch of other opinions. And I'm not going to get into the specific opinions because I'm just talking about the approach within the dimensional level of consciousness. So it's really important that you recognize where you are in it. And sometimes you might have awareness as such that you do approach something from a fifth dimensional consciousness. And other times you may be less aware or less educated of something else in which you will then be approaching it from a third dimensional consciousness. But if you know where you are in it, then you know how to better maneuver yourself in those conversations. Just like if you approach someone who's just door shut, wants to just share opinions in third dimensional consciousness, that conversation just might not be worth your energy, right? So something to ponder, something to really think about, because again, like I said, we're in this very active energy of shift. And if we go back to the idea of the 60s, there was this big revolution of freedom of thought and choice and expression. And if you think about it, Spirit explained that we are in that same energy of revolution, but it's like adding like a nitrous tank to it. So it's even more exponential. So we will see more exponential polarity and reactivity to these changing thoughts. Now, the reason why we're having this is because there is so much, there's so much manipulation happening on our planet right now. We have how do I explain this? It made a lot of sense in my brain before. Okay, so we have manipulation on many levels of being on our planet right now. And although, like I said before in the last podcast, that the source of darkness has exited, they still said that there would be lots of ripples that we would have to deal with, even though the source of it, the battery for it, is gone. So as we recognize this mass amount of manipulation on the planet, we can see that it can be from small scale within families. We can see that it is on a grander scale within community or governments or advice, even medical advice. Vaccines are a go, vaccines are not a go, vaccines are good, vaccines are bad. And again, I'm not going to take a stance on what is good or bad here. I'm just going to present information, okay? The thing is what's happened is we have been given this manipulation of truth, because the ways that we used to blindly follow truth before, we were kind of, in a sense, narrow-minded in our views of where to find the source of truth, has turned upside down. And so certain news sources that we used to value as truth are being warped and bent for us to question the truth of them. I'm not saying they're bad, but we're being questioned. We are asked to question the truth. Same with certain celebrities. Same with certain governments. Same with certain manufacturers. Different people that we would follow. We are being asked to question everything on every level. And then even if you look at your own personal life, we take it down to the micro scale within your own journey, you're being made to question, say, your family relationships. You're being made to question your friendships, your role in your life, your role in your job. And then we take it down even more to, say, the nano scale, and you're being made to question, what are your own personal truths? What are the truths that reside within your soul? What things have you been telling yourself throughout your life that actually are not true? Or what things have you been avoiding from seeing what is true in your life? So on every level, like I've always said, as above, so below. Spirit always says what's happening on a cosmic level is happening on an internal atomic level. And so we're being asked to question truth, which is why Spirit has been saying over and over again, for us to go over this waterfall before you have to be shoved. And again, if you guys are just listening for the first time, if you go back to the podcast, I believe maybe April-ish, we started talking about the waterfall. And the waterfall is a concept of diving over the waterfall and turning in the waters below to see what is your truth, to see what needs to be healed, mended, released, to move forward knowing who you are, because they have stressed over and over that moving through this year, it is really important to know who you are, to base your reality off of your sense of self, right? And so what they kind of showed was that, again, if we are not willing to kind of step over this waterfall ourselves, they're starting to, and this is going to sound more harsh, but they're kind of starting to shove people over the waterfall. Again, that's a metaphorical explanation here, right? But they're kind of shoving. And for some people, it's just going to be a shove, period. But for others, even this week, again, there was this call from Spirit, and they showed me, if we go back into old Norse mythology, is Odin's tree, right? And the idea and the story behind that is that the god Odin hung himself from his tree for 9 days to gain knowledge of the runes, to gain more wisdom and knowledge, but he had to hang from the tree and be willing to sacrifice himself. Now, I am not suggesting that, but what I got from Spirit was that they are basically, for many of you, there is such a push right now, such an internal push to check your perspective, that some of you are almost feeling like you're being hung upside down. Like if we go to the tarot cards, if we look at tarot cards, and there's a card called the Hanged Man, and it's a man hanging upside down. And so what they showed me is that many right now are being grabbed by the ankle, metaphorically, and hung upside down to make them have to see a different perspective. And this action of spiritually being hung upside down right now, again, this is for those that are resisting. Some of you have already gone over the waterfall. That's awesome. but you may be watching and observing others that haven't gone over it yet. And this may make sense to you. Because what's happening is some of them that are hung upside down right now by their foot, by a vine, are being forced to see stuff from a different perspective. And the reaction to this influx of energy is basically causing people either to react in super amounts of fear, like just frozen in fear. It's causing some people to react in searching frantically external to them, outside of them, for a source of it instead of looking within. And with others, it's causing them to react in an anger where they're just wanting to like pick fights or be angry or gossip and natter about stuff because they're basically wanting to distract themselves from the energy that is calling them to please look inside, look within. So if you find that you're really kind of feeling caught up in one of these energies, it's a call to look within. It's a call to see what is the trigger that's happening within for you so that you can mend and shift it before basically you get kind of dropped into the waters below the waterfall. And even the idea of being dropped is not about a punishment. Nothing in this from Spirit is about a punishment, but it's about awakening and the invitation to do it purposefully. Because once you know your sense of self and your truths within, you can start to really observe and choose how you want to react to the reality outside of you. And therefore, the chaos that's happening around you doesn't have to instill a fear anymore, and you can move through these changing times with a calm sense of choosing your next right step. So it's not about figuring it all out and knowing exactly what to do. It's about choosing what the next right thing is that feels right to you, that matches with your sense of integrity, your sense of self, your authentic knowing, however you want to word it. It's about finding what matches with that. But in order to know that, you have to get through your own personal stuff. So this internal work, again, it sounds silly, but it has to be done internally. So again, if you find yourself searching everywhere external to you for a source of it, go within, because that's where the answers are. The other thing they wanted to say was that these changes that are happening, that we're seeing on the planet, are going to continue to amplify in a sense, but it's going to amplify in a way that Mother Earth is also wanting to step in and help it. So what I mean by that is she is going to, in essence, shake things up, whether that be earthquakes, more hurricanes, tornadoes, fires. All of this stuff is stuff that I have been seeing, especially in the month of August. I talked a lot about the fiery energy of Leo and the energies moving and changing. And so this is what we're seeing happening, and we're going to continue to see this because, again, what we're dealing with right now is more than just a human thing. We're dealing with a cosmic shift. And the reason why I'm saying cosmic shift, this is the other part of the part two, is there are so many other higher beings involved in the shifting of our planet and the shifting of humanity and consciousness. Like I said before, how I told my 8-year-old son that, we're not the only planet in all the galaxies of galaxies out there to be the only inhabited planet. Right? Purposeful pause here to just ponder that. So that being said, we're not the only spirits of things, or there isn't only a third dimensional reality as we see on this planet. We are multifaceted beings, and we are connected to multifaceted cosmic energy. So when I say it that way, that takes it like way out there, right? That expands the idea so big, and for some people, again, that's where it starts to get kind of overwhelming. And it's not about making it overwhelming, it's about just recognizing that it is so much more than just this world we are walking in, just this world that we are maneuvering through and living our lives. We are part of a greater cosmic cycle. So that being said, there are other light beings, and I always use the word light beings to be careful with people, but I'm talking about different beings. Most of us are comfortable with the idea of angels. Most of us are comfortable with the idea of guides, but we're embracing and we're inviting in concepts of other light beings from different places, different dimensions, different realms. Some of you may call it alien, and again, that word alien just freaks people out. But alien being simply something not of this planet. But if we are multifaceted, multidimensional beings, why would we be limited to our role in the cosmos to just this planet? Does that make sense? Now, what I'm getting at, and I will go into the specifics of light beings in a separate one, but basically, when we can look at the world that we're living in from a greater scale, we can see that Mother Earth is a being within herself, and Mother Earth is desiring these changes as well. And we have lots of help coming in, as we have been already, from the higher realms to help us shift in consciousness, to help rid this planet of the darker energies that are affecting the chaos. And they're also helping us to move through these chaos energies as we clear it out. So these are good things. But we have to think with our souls and our cosmic mind. Because when we think and perceive, again, coming back to perspectives, when we can look at what's happening in our world through the cosmic mind or the cosmic lens, we can see, or we can choose to see what's happening in the 3D world through a lens of consciousness or love. We don't need to see it through a lens of fear, because then it becomes conscious choice of what we want to do. Like, let me take, and I'm going to be really careful here with what I choose, but let's talk about vaccines. Just for a second, I'm going to be careful with this. But if we look through a lens of fear, we can look at vaccines and think, oh my gosh, I need to have a vaccine. The world isn't safe without a vaccine, period. Or, I would never, ever, ever get a vaccine. I never want a vaccine. All vaccines are bad. Vaccines are horrible. Now, there's truth to both the yes and the no of both. But if we look at that and we approach it through the lens of consciousness or love, not fear, where we are gaining information, moving through the information based on what we feel, not based on our triggers or what we're being told to feel, we can assess what is right for our journey. That's something that's really important to know. So again, this is a consciousness of community, of shared wealth, balanced medicines for mind, body, and spirit, kindness, compassion. I mean, the list goes on. There's so many things. And this consciousness that's coming down on our planet is not a utopian ideal, but it is a shift that really can occur over time if everyone chooses to step up, if everyone chooses to become conscious in how their actions are. And we're not living in a world based on reactivity and undiscovered ego. We're living in a world of responsible reactions and balanced ego. There's a difference there. So, really, it's up to you guys how you take this information, and it's up to you guys how you embrace it, imbibe it, all of that. But it's being put out there for you guys to ponder, and me as well, right? As I speak to you guys and as I share these things, I'm learning at the same time. But we really, if we can see that we are so deeply connected, as above, so below, and what we do has such an integral part in it, then we can start to really make our mark on making the world a better place, which many of you are already doing. So I'm going to leave that with you guys right now. Thank you for bearing with me through this. I realize it's a little scattered, but I'm going to leave it there for today. So I wish you guys a good rest of your day, and I will be back more next week.